Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. British theatre company Les Enfants Terribles celebrates its 20th anniversary in 2022 with a brand new production in conjunction with Home Manchester, adapted from Sophie Anderson's novel The House with Chicken Legs. The book has been adapted by company founder Oliver Lansley and is directed by Oli with Creative Director James Seager. I spoke to Oli and James during rehearsals with a week to go before opening night and asked them to explain what the show is about. After a short debate, Oli kicks us off.
Want me to go?
Well, you're the writer.
Well, the adapter, yeah. So basically, this was. I think we've always had a little fascination with Baba Yaga. We had a Baba Yaga in a show that we did, an outdoor show years ago, which was it was literally like a house that would get up and run around and scare people, and we kind of loved that as an image. And then when I saw the name of this book, The House with Chicken Legs, and I saw the cover, I just immediately, before I even knew anything about it, was like, that feels like a show for us.
Yeah.
And thankfully I was right. But it was, so basically it was literally it was one of those things where you're like, this feels perfect. And so I managed to get hold of the author, managed to get hold of the book and have a read of it. And it's just a really kind of, it's a really sort of magical story. So it's a very relatable story, but it's also very us in the way that it talks about kind of, it's about a young girl who's sort of 12, and the story is really about growing up and becoming a grown up and kind of, taking on responsibility. But it's done in a way where her grandmother is a Baba Yaga, and she helps guide the dead souls to the other side. And so it's very kind of fairy tale, macabre. It's got lovely kind of details and characters, and it just felt like something that we could take and have a lot of fun with. So that's kind of where it started. But that was years ago now, because it's been pushed back and knocked back by pandemics and this, that, and the other. So finally to be a week away is terrifying, but also very exciting.
Yeah. Do you want to just explain more about Baba Yaga? Because I mean, it's from Russian folklore, isn't it? But I don't know whether she's known so much over here.
Yeah, it's a Ukrainian folktale originally, and it's about Baba Yaga is sort of what we would know as a archetypal witch, if you like. So the image of Baba Yaga is this old woman with a warty nose and long white hair and, headscarf, and she takes many forms in many different tales, and she lives in a house with chicken legs. And so there are lots of appearances of Baba Yaga in various different kind of fairy tales and folklores. And so you might think of, the witch in Snow White is basically Baba Yaga, essentially. And, in various forms, that kind of archetype appears throughout. What's really nice about Sophie Anderson, who is the author of the book, and what she's done with Baba is sort of taken that folk tale, but turned it on its head a little bit. So, as I said, the Yagas guide the dead, and so they're actually these really lovely, warm characters, but because they look a certain way, it kind of scares the living off. But the Yagas themselves are actually these sort of very warm, welcoming characters that help you pass through on, back to the stars, as it is in the book.
When you die.
Yeah. And so I think what we've taken from that is, although Baba Yaga is this kind of piece of European folklore, for us, that sort of expanded out to the idea that, well, there will be these Yaga figures in all different cultures all over the world that often people have kind of been afraid of or have, classed as witches or this, that, and the other. But actually, all of those stories can kind of be traced back to the Baba Yagas. So we have a lot of fun with multiple versions of Baba Yagas at one point coming on stage, all in houses with chicken legs.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
But you've done quite a few adaptations before, but mostly not, I think, with living authors. So how has this been different? Have you actually worked with Sophie Anderson on this?
Yeah, I mean, she deliberately. I mean, she's been really supportive, but she's kind of stepped back deliberately and wanted to, because she wants to see it on the opening night. So
she's sort of given us free rein.
Yeah. And
let's hope that was a wise decision.
Yeah, I know. I said to her early on, I said, do you want to read the script? And she was like, oh no, I think this is the best way. I want to see it, on stage for the first time. So, but I think what Ollie's done in adapting it has captured the spirit of the book amazingly. And the book is essentially about responsibility. It's about grief, and it can be quite dark and macabre, but it's beautifully done. It's written beautifully done, and I think hopefully what we've done is capture that essence of the book and the fun as well, and this kind of big story of this little girl, 12-year-old, and her life from essentially becoming a teenager, and her responsibility of becoming the next Yaga, but which she doesn't want to do. So it is all about responsibility, growth, and ultimately death, but it's handled in a really beautiful, uplifting way, which really appealed when I read the book, and I think that's what we've hopefully captured it in the essence of the script adaptation as well, which I'm very excited for Sophie to see it.
So where do you start? I mean, I know you've not been faced with challenges before in your shows, but where do you start adapting a book where a house can get up and walk away?
Yeah.
Well, I think with any adaptation, I think it's a real art in trying to do a good adaptation, because like instinctively your first instincts are just to kind of translate and put this thing in that place.
Yeah.
And actually, I think often that doesn't necessarily lend itself to the best outcome. So what we try and do is take the spirit of something and then go, what is the best version of this on stage? In terms of the chicken legs, well, we like as you say, we kind of love a challenge. We did think of many different versions of this because there are moments when the house gets up and
goes to a different location.
So trying to figure out how you can stage a show which is mostly set in a house, but which at any point can stand up and
run somewhere else
is definitely a challenge. But it's been quite a fun challenge at times.
Absolutely. And without giving it away as well, I think that the language that we found for the house is quite exciting, and how we do that is it excites me anyway.
The house is very much a character in the show. And that was a big thing that we were trying to do, is because ultimately a lot of it is really about her relationship with the house, which when you read it in a book, you can get, or if you're watching a Pixar film, you can go, oh yeah, I completely see how the house is a character and comes alive. If you're watching Encanto, the Disney film where they've got a living house, you're like, yeah, great, that's easy to do. And then when you're like, okay, so how do we do that on stage? Then it is a challenge, but you find a different language, you find a different way of capturing the same spirit, I think.
And I think that the show, how we've done that is quite similar to our working methods with other shows. And we always, I always say, we always get the most out of our actors, and our 6 actors in the show are amazing, but they do a lot. And that happens, I think, in most of our shows, where they're playing instruments, puppetry, moving the house, and or being different characters. They're always fully on. And I think using them within the house is something that we've tried to look at. And
you don't get much time off when you're in a Les Enfants show.
No.
we like to get our money's worth.
But it makes it more exciting, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen you in loads of different types of venues, and I suppose the venue, to some extent, dictates how you do it. I mean, in the days when you were in poky little attics in Edinburgh, you wouldn't be able to do this show in quite the same way. You would have done it with more narration, perhaps. So
we've probably been in venues that are smaller than the house, which is in our show.
It's quite
built for the show.
Yeah, it's an amazing. Jasmine Swan, the designer, has created a house of beauty, and I can't wait for people to see that, because it's amazing. But as Ollie said, it's huge. It's huge, but lovely. And yeah, you're right. And back in the old Edinburgh days, we've probably done a show in that house. In fact, now we can tour it, put it on wheels and tour it around the country and do shows inside it.
All goes to pot, at least.
Yeah, do it inside there.
Yeah, I think the first show I ever saw of yours was it had a big caravan that you were trailing around, wasn't it? It was in one of the Pleasance venues, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was probably the Terrible Infants, which was up in Edinburgh two years, a long time ago, which we bought back in 2018 to Wilton's.
But again, that was interesting because that was like, as we're talking about now, the difference between that show in Edinburgh and then reimagining it for Wilton's is a kind of very different experience, but you're trying to figure out how do you add to it but not take away from it, because there is always a charm to that side of what we do, which is the kind of feeling like, we could, we're just picking things up and telling stories with it and traveling around, and there's it's that balance of going, we're in this beautiful theatre with all these resources, how do we keep the kind of element that feels like us, but also make the most of all these great toys that we get to play with.
Yeah, I remember that show, Terrible Infants. The year after, I think you were in the Purple Cow with all the noise from the bar outside and everything. It felt quite a different show. I don't know whether it did to you, did it?
Yeah.
I mean with that particular show, I don't know why I did it with this show, but a long time ago, I started writing. I noted down everywhere where it's been, and I think we've taken that show to, I think it's 130 different venues. So,
including a tent. Like a swimming pool,
a swimming pool, absolutely mad places. A swimming pool in Poland. So it does work. The surprising thing, it does work differently in different venues. But yeah, I mean, doing it in the Cow presented a few obstacles, especially when it rained, as we found out. Yeah. But yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember it's a bit scary in there when it gets windy as well. It feels like it's going to take off. Yeah. But it's 20 years of Les Enfants now. I mean, it makes me feel all that because I've been watching you for a large part of that. So what does it feel like now looking over 20 years? Wow,
it's a good question. It feels like it's gone very quickly. Yeah. It's really nice to be presenting and almost by accident, because Oli said we were supposed to be doing House of the Chicken Legs 2 years ago, but obviously the pandemic, prevented that. So it's fortuitous that it's this month that we turn 20, and it's this month that we're opening this new show. So it's really nice to be in Manchester doing this show that very much feels like a Les Enfants show. I think.
Yeah, it feels really like, strangely, we were saying it's been such a long time since we've made a show like this, because we've been, busy doing big immersive shows and events and stuff. So there's something that feels very like the essence of what you would have seen in Pleasance 2, watching the Terrible Infants. It feels like it's got that same spirit.
And I think, being 20, especially the last 7 years, it has been quite interesting for us. We did a very big immersive show, Alice's Ventures Underground, in London in 2015, and that really propelled us to a different area and a different level, and it's quite interesting. Some people who may have only just seen that show started thinking, "Oh, you guys are an immersive theatre company." Well, no, we've been going 14 years before we did an immersive show. So it's nice to get back to our roots. We've done probably 5 immersive shows in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But as directors, Oli and I don't, even though they're very different, we still approach immersive shows as we would approach this show. It's all about the story to us and telling a story. And that's what we try and do in our immersive shows as well. But it's nice to be creating a new piece of theatre since the pandemic, but also since doing those large scale immersive shows and also being in Manchester as well, and presenting a premiere of a show up here is something we've wanted to do for a very, very long time. So it's a shame it's taken us this long, over 20 years. We've toured obviously all around the country, but never started a show other than the Edinburgh Festival outside of London. So it's great to be finally doing that, and it's great to be co-producing with Home, and it's great to be doing something that's different, but also feels very much a Les Enfants show.
When you look back over the 20 years, you've done very different types of shows. Like you say, the immersive show in the vaults, those shows back in Edinburgh of different size venues. There's those pokey little attics, but also you did Pleasance 1 with the Trench. I saw that there. And you've done outdoor theatre. I saw one of your outdoor kids shows at Latitude Festival, 6 years ago, something like that. Looking back, what is a Les Enfants Terribles show? Have you got more of an idea now when you look back over 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a show that is. I mean, we said it earlier that there's a lot going on, I think, in our shows, and that's not because we want to throw everything at it. It's just a natural evolve of the story in terms of and who we work with. We tend to work with actor musos and puppets, and that doesn't mean every Les Enfants show has to have those elements, but sometimes, a Les Enfants show normally will have the same writer, Oli, and will normally have the same directors, Oli and I. And then sometimes, we're working with the same designer. In this case, Sam Wyatt is doing the puppetry and costume, and we've worked with him for the last 15 years. And we're working with Alexander Wolfe, who's the composer and has written some beautiful songs, and he did all the songs for The Trench. So the bringing people back and actually working with new people has been great, like Jazz, the designer. But I guess there's a feel, if we've all worked, Al, Sam, Oli, and I, and before, that it has that kind of DNA of who we are.
Yeah, I hope our shows feel like we're sharing a secret with our audience. I feel like that's the sort of quality that a Les Enfants show has. There's although me naming the company as a pretentious 19-year-old and, feeling awkward about, saying it in a French accent for 20 years, there is something kind of perfect about our name, because we are like naughty children. We do there is a thread of mischief in what we do. And I think we always, it's very theatrical, and it's always, the audience are always part of the experience. We're never, we're not the sort of theatre company that goes, right, sit there and here's a fourth wall and let's pretend that you're not there. We very much want to bring you into the story with us. And at its heart, it's kind of old-fashioned storytelling, and I think, we like to kind of think that whatever we're doing, there's a version of it that could be told around a campfire and still kind of work. Yeah. I think that's what we try and do. We want to make it feel like someone says something nice recently, said we make children's shows for grown-ups. Yeah. Which I thought was quite nice. We try and make the grown-ups who come to see our shows feel like children. But then we like to make the children who see our shows feel like grown-ups.
So there is a strong influence of the fairy tale, the folk tale. There's a strong storytelling tradition, even in something like The Trench, which was quite a harrowing First World War story. You went into some kind of fantasy and sort of folktale world, didn't you? 20 years ago, as a pretentious 19-year-old, what was influencing you? Where did this come from? What were you actually watching that where this style came from?
I think I was always influenced by more European styles of theatre, and whether that was, I remember very early on Berkoff's work, which was very kind of physical and very raw, but then came from kind of the Greek tragedies and stuff like that. But also, as a kid, I would read Roald Dahl and Grimm Tales. I think always for me, the stories that I was attracted to when I was younger were stories that kind of scared me a little bit, or not scared me. They provoked me. They weren't stories that tried to pretend the world wasn't complicated. They acknowledged the world was complicated, but in a way that was sort of, appropriate and challenging. And so I think, for me, there's that real essence of the purity of kind of European theatre, whether that stems from Commedia and that type of thing, or even just, I love the idea of, you have these, Russian theatre companies that are a theatre company for, they sign on and they're part of that company for 5 years and they rehearse a show for 9 months. And then they talk, this idea of theatre being life and this kind of sense of traveling the world and telling stories is such a kind of romantic and fun idea. I think that has always been a thread of it. So I think, I was always drawn to that type of stuff. And even like Shakespeare, even Shakespearean work where it breaks the fourth wall and it talks to the audience and engages the audience. I think something about that always spoke to me more than going and seeing a straightforward play and, and just sitting there and watching that. I always felt like if you've got an audience locked in a room with you, then you shouldn't be ignoring them. Yes.
And it's embracing the theatricality of the situation that you're in. And I think both of us, me growing up, attracted to, Roald Dahl as well, stories like that, and those type of influences you can see in most of our work. But usually, between the two of us, we find that we like and are inspired by the same stuff, which helps, of course.
Yeah. Can you actually see a development then in the work looking back? Can you see how it's changed?
I think you can, and I think we in the early days, we definitely got into a routine of taking a show to Edinburgh. That was very much I guess our schedule in the early days of we'd do a show in Edinburgh and then we might tour it afterwards and then we do another show and that's how the company, we were born out of Edinburgh, really. The Edinburgh Festival. We learn, the company was formed because it was, Oli and I were like, well, you just want to put shows on. So, setting up the first show that we did, which was a Stephen Burkoff play, Oli got a director in and said to me as an actor, oh, do you want to be in it? And I was like, yeah, why not? And then before we realized it, each year doing a show up at the Fringe, we realized that actually, we were producing, we learned on the job doing it. But I think as the shows evolved, it took us probably 4 years and with a new show each year to kind of find a little bit of our voice, even though, the early shows in some ways are very dissimilar to the latter shows.
It definitely they are, though, actually in their DNA. Like when
not in the DNA, and especially
we slightly evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned before Terrible Infants. That was probably a big turning point in many, many ways for us as a company. It was the first time that we worked with Sam as a designer, first time that we did complete direct address to the audience, first time that we worked with puppets, first time we worked with actor musos, and also it did quite well in Edinburgh, and it allowed us to have a voice outside of Edinburgh, and started to tour that particular show around the world. So that was one show that was a bit of a turning point for us.
Don't forget, Immaculate had direct address.
Yeah, it did.
And
I think it did. But complete direct address that particular show. But yeah, I think looking back over 20 years, there are complete similarities between all the shows, and they have evolved, and sometimes they've got bigger, or sometimes they're not as big. But
I think we're maybe more like, I don't think the essence of what we do has changed hugely. I think we're more aware or in control of the chaos now, or just more, older and more chilled out. Like I think there's always chaos, and I think we sort of need an element of that to make our shows. But I think we're a bit more, in control of it a
little bit, and we've had to adapt as well, and we've learned a lot on the job. But even everyone with the pandemic has had to adapt, and suddenly during the pandemic, everyone was faced with what do you do? And we started to work online and create a show doing it online, and that kind of pushed us obviously in that direction, and that's kind of opened our eyes to something else, but also adapting and doing different large scale events or immersive experience has taught us a lot. But we still approach all these experiences, shows, probably in the same way, and still want to concentrate on what's important to us, which is the story of how to get an audience into that story.
I think we trust our own instincts more, or just care less about what other people think, maybe. But I think early on you spend a lot of time looking for approval or trying to kind of please other people, and also early on you learn by kind of imitation. But saying that, we still will see something and go, oh, we want to do something like that. Yeah. But I think now we're a bit more able to just go, yeah, this is what we want to do. We know that when our work is good, it's because we love it.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of make sure that we love it.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of, one of our artistic policies is, to do something that we love to do. We read the book that Sophie wrote, House of the Chicken Legs. And when Oli found it and, gave it to me and I read it, I was like, I love this book. We've got to do this. We've got to put this on stage.
And whenever we try and do something because we think it is a good business decision or we think it will be popular or this and the other, it's always a disaster. Yeah. So we've learned to just go like, who knows? You roll the dice, but as long as we love what we're doing, usually it gets us through.
Yeah.
Usually.
You shouldn't try to second guess what the audience will like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as a director, I'm always thinking about the audience in terms of directing a show of what they would love, what I would love, but you can't please everyone. But you just make shows that you think actually I would love to go and see this show as an audience member, and I think that's what we try to do as well. Obviously inspired by other shows or films or books, but that's the essence of always thinking, well, actually, I'm sure people would really grab onto this, really enjoy this, really love this. And I think that's what this show is. I think it's funny, it's moving, it's emotional, it's, at times sad, but at times very uplifting. And I think it's an important story about someone growing up and learning about responsibility, but with a load of puppets and houses with chicken legs as well. So fun,
Yeah.
I think, sometimes that word can be a little bit dirty or a little bit, in theatre, you can't use that word. But I think we're not afraid, I think, as a company to say, yeah, this does tackle big themes, but at the same time, it's entertaining.
It's not homework.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And especially at these times, people, what everyone's facing, people do need a really good, enjoyable night out.
Yeah. I mean, Brecht used to talk about fun. Most directors of Brecht, certainly in this country, don't seem to know that. But Spaß,
you don't
fun,
associate that with productions of Brecht.
No, certainly none of the ones I've seen. Fun. Your shows do seem to come from playfulness. And on the one hand, watching your shows, you can imagine the rehearsals being great fun. On the other hand, you think there's a lot of meticulous detail in here, which takes a lot of work to get right. And you can imagine that's what you're concentrating on a week before opening, is it now?
It's a really good question, because I think that is an essence that I hope does come across, the fun, the energy. And sometimes a lot of people say our shows, the backstage could be just a show in itself of everyone running here, grabbing that prop, grabbing that instrument, grabbing this. It is very well, it is hugely choreographed in terms of what everyone has to do. But yeah, I mean, the rehearsal period for this has been really fun, actually, discovering what we want to do, and the actors in this are super talented, and I think they've enjoyed themselves as well.
I think you can't necessarily kind of fake you can't kind of come in and like crack the whip at your actors and go on there and make it look like you're having a good time. So I think you have to kind of cultivate that sort of energy within the company and within the show itself, so that when people do go out there and perform, that the audience feels that everyone's having a good time, including the people on stage. Yeah.
You said before, it's like fairy tales, kids theatre for adults, but you also had a spin-off kids theatre company, Les Petits. What's happening with that?
Yes. Well, we're actually looking for a new book to adapt into a stage show under that company.
We're talking about something maybe next year. Is it next year?
Yeah, potentially next year. So, and again, conversations had started pre-pandemic, really, but obviously have been on hold for 2 years. But yeah, we did a show. I mean, the last show we did was over Christmas time 2019, I think, under the Les Petits banner, a kids show that was in London. So yeah, we're looking forward to progressing discussions on that book, and hopefully bring something next year, towards the end of next year, hopefully.
what else is Les Enfants doing with this show and with anything else? You said before about you've got an online production.
Yeah. So, I mean, that show, it was born out of the pandemic. When everyone was in lockdown, we thought we have to do something. And we created an online Zoom show, Sherlock Holmes, which was kind of a version of the immersive Sherlock Holmes show that we'd done in 2016. We put it all on Zoom and we worked with loads of actors, and it went really well. It was great. And it opens in 2 weeks' time now in China. So it's been licensed to Taiwan, which is crazy. And now, and then a month after that, it will open in Shanghai. So, and also when we did that show, we wrote and it was a very crazy period of time for everyone, but obviously we were doing it all at home, working on it at home. We were approached by a VR company from Austria called Roost, who loved it and said, "Hey, have you guys ever thought about converting it into VR?" And we thought, no, never thought about that. But that's what we're doing. So we're converting it into this VR experience. And we're working with this. It's a co-production with this Austrian company. And hopefully that will be released in the coming months on Oculus through Meta, and releasing that is a crazy thing. But I think what they were attracted to is that they saw it and they thought, this is very theatrical. This is a show and this is narrative. It's very us, but there's nothing like that on the Oculus in the VR site. So they saw an opportunity there of getting theatre into this type of realm. So that's exciting. That will be this year, hopefully just before the summer. That
we're
will come
also
out.
Working on something very big, which I know I'm not allowed to talk about just yet. But that we will hopefully be announcing in the next month or so, next 6 weeks, who knows? But that's quite a big thing for us, and it's very, very exciting. So we'll look forward to coming back and talking to you about that when we're allowed to.
Yeah, and this show, I assume you're hoping that we'll go on to other things.
We hope so, yeah, very much. We really would love to be able to kind of bring it to more people. It's such a... We're really excited about it. So we're so excited about sharing it with Manchester audiences as of next week. But then, fingers crossed we'll get to show it to everybody else as well.
Oliver Lansley and James Seager of Les Enfants Terribles about their new adaptation of The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson, which runs at Home Manchester from the 29th of March to the 23rd of April 2022. For more information and tickets, see homemcr.org or call the box office on 0161 200 1500. For more information about Les Enfants Terribles, see lesenfantsterribles.co.uk. The music for the show featured in this episode is by Alexander Wolfe. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.